Adaptive leadership means enabling people to come together, experiment, and innovate. We ask leaders in development to discuss the attributes a person needs to excel in this form of leadership.
I think to excel in adaptive leadership, you need 3 sort of core personal attributes, and they don't have to be things that are come naturally to you, but they're things that you need to acquire or figure out how to get pretty quickly. The most basic of those is probably just persistence. It's just being able to recognize that a lot of the challenges that adaptive leadership takes, or that adaptive development takes on, are the hardest ones that are left after all the easy ones have been already solved. And in rich countries that are now rich, it took centuries in some cases for these issues to be solved. And so we were speaking before about building the rule of law, for example. That it wasn't just like a project that happened in 3 years between 1683 and 1686 or something like that. It took centuries and centuries and centuries for the divine right of kings to end, for being able to ensure that everybody, in principle, at least functioned under the same laws as everybody else, that princes and paupers would be in the same, subject to the same laws as everybody else. And so just dogged persistence is probably the most important thing. But you've also got to have discernment, because if you have this relentless persistence, you could be a fool on a fool's errand. You can be a very dogged, persistent person just doing something that really fundamentally is never going to work, no matter how hard you try or how noble your intentions. And discernment isn't just an individual attribute, it's a collective attribute. It's something that happens because you're part of a team, and the team has to rely on its collective intelligence, not just the individual talents of one person. So persistence combined with a sense of genuine discernment about when to cut your losses or when to figure out that you should persist. It's never obvious which one of those is the right choice, and so having a team of people around you that can help make that decision and live with the consequences of that is a really important component of it. And just, I think, a genuine curiosity. You know, if you're someone who thinks that you're always right and that you just sort of look at the world trying to confirm what you already believe about things, then you'll find them if you look hard enough. I think most of what we're doing now in development in this adaptive space is it's so hard to anticipate actually what the eventual solution will look like, it's not obvious what it will look like. Certainly not obvious at the beginning of the process. It might look slightly obvious with the benefit of hindsight, as our own lives often have much more coherence looking backwards rather than they do going forwards. So, yeah, a curiosity, and then I guess since the word adaptive is in it, we've got to practice what we preach. We've got to be consistent with that principle, and that means being willing to change even what we've articulated as the defining principles of this. Maybe some of those themselves need to be adjusted along the way, and that's hard to do that just because our systems of managing money and managing careers and managing work programs in development require structure. They require, if not permanence, they require solidity and commitment to objectives that must be upheld and that you're held accountable for and all that sort of stuff. And adjusting the goalposts halfway along can be interpreted as cheating or as just letting yourself off the hook or whatever. And it's just so I've given you 3 things, but I think the 4th would be sort of recognizing that you are taking on problems that are so complicated that even people who are very well-intentioned and very accommodating with regards to what you're doing, a lot of the times you're going to get a lot of resistance to what you're doing because people are just doing their job, not because they're evil or because they're sticks in the mud that don't want to change. People have different temperaments. People select into being accountants, I would imagine, largely because they like a very ordered world. They love an Excel spreadsheet. They love being able to see all the rows and columns add up predictably and follow formulas and they all work, you know. And those are the people that sit around and manage the millions and billions of dollars of international development. And so having these heterodox people doing stuff that's all about adaptive innovation and creativity and that's just They can just completely freak out people whose job it is to and take very seriously their job of managing the flow of public money to make sure that people aren't running off and doing stupid things with it. So tolerance for the fact that other people have very genuine skills they bring to bear and legitimate roles that they're performing, and that trying to accommodate those people as well as dealing with the genuinely resistant and uncooperative people that are sometimes inevitably part of this. You just got to be good at being able to deal with an array of different temperaments and assume that most people most of the time are actually trying to do the right thing and wanting to do the right thing, and then trying to open up the space for that, what constitutes how we're going to get there, to be a little broader than it might otherwise be. And so to me, that's the leadership challenge in a nutshell, but it's also the types of temperaments that one needs to either self-select for from a human resources point of view or self-cultivate or team cultivate, because then sooner or later you're going to encounter all of those kinds of challenges, and the sooner you can figure out how to deal with them, the slightly longer the probability that you'll be able to keep your job and keep being paid to do what is actually quite counterintuitive to a lot of people and to a lot of systems.
I think the basis of any style of leadership has got to be your foundational values. So I think whether you're an adaptive leader or a directive leader or any other style of leader, you've always got to live by the values and articulate the values that you believe in. Having said that, I think it's really important to seek collaboration, to seek an environment where you understand the context within people are acting, understand what's really going on, if I could say, with the problem holders, because in international development, we're not there because everything's going swimmingly, right? We're there because there are really significant challenges that people have got, whether it's getting basic services to people or whether it's getting economic development for people. And so I think what's really important is to be open-minded and not to go in with, one style of solution. And one of the challenges that I think is really interesting for development is that many of us are trained in disciplines and we tend to think in a structured way according to the training that we've had in our discipline. But in fact, many problems are multifactorial, which means we have to be open to a whole range of different solutions to problems. So for example, WHO did some work on, what actually achieved impact in terms of the Global Strategy for Women's and Children's Health, and 50% of the successful impact came from outside of the health sector. So what that means is that we are trained in our health sector paradigms, for example, but we have to be open that there are other solutions, that there are other ways of thinking about solving a problem. So I always think that you start with the problem, that you understand it from the context of the problem holders, and that you collaborate with anyone who might have a way of helping solve that problem and bring a development solution. So that means you've got to set your paradigms aside, you've got to be open to many diverse points of view, you've got to understand context, and you've got to be focused on bringing people together around solving a problem. So I always think in any form of leadership, if you're really clear whether it's a vision of where you're going or the problem that you're solving, if people understand that, that can garner them together to work, on either achieving that vision or solving that problem.
So to be a good adaptive leader, the one thing is that you need to learn how to adapt to a situation, by which I mean your personality skill should be able to absorb new knowledge and new experiences. So even if you are a development professional who has spent decades doing work overseas in different countries, that does not mean you are aware of every single context and every single situation that might arise. I think this is particularly true for emergency contexts and when there is either civil strife or a natural disaster. That is when you need people to be able to adapt to the new situations emerging in front of them. So your personality trait, your skill set should be malleable, where you are able to perform as a professional who is able to provide relief services or even do long-term development programs or medium-term programs, which might last to a couple of years to 10 years. But in to achieve any of that, the main thing would be that you are resilient in learning, and you are also able to have those skills to learn, to absorb new information and new knowledge.
For me, it's ability to listen and incorporate feedback according to the needs of the project. Because feedback is good, but it's not all feedback. You have to be able to sort through that information and adapt accordingly to the needs of the project. I think also what I call high emotional intelligence, to understand each team member's specific skill set and adapting that accordingly. At the same time, ensuring that they can be challenged in other areas if they would like to.
Well, I mean, I come back to that fundamental one. I think we have to develop the faculty of observation as a crucial skill, and one that we do not have well developed, because in Western thinking, we're very prone to intervention. And this is a polarity: observation, intervention. You know what's really ironic from modern quantum physics perspective is that we know observation is an intervention. You know, you observe physical phenomena and they change. So, you know, maybe if we could emphasize leader capability, skills in observation, we could be actually equipping our leaders with some of the most profound intervention skills, because they're enfolded within one another. Now, obviously, from the framework I've been suggesting, you know, other skills are around hosting conversations, which is really about the art of dialogue. It's about forming powerful questions that unlock energy that is about possibility, not drains energy in terms of, you know, the same old problem. You know, we need to really create unlock imaginative capabilities. So, you know, observation, dialogue, question design. We're constantly, you know, as leaders, responsible for form. You know, how do we set up rooms? How are we going to create the conditions for possible dialogue?